we're going to call to order. Let's start with roll call. Anderson.
Here.
Einen Lynch.
Here.
Frazier.
Here.
Gade.
Here.
Grimm.
Here.
Harrelson.
Here.
Murray.
Here.
Shetty.
Here.
Silman. Smith. And Sturdivant is present. Staff members.
Daniel Bissell.
Megan Hill.
All right, next we have approval of minutes from last meeting, which were included in today's packet. Did anybody notice anything corrected? All right, so we have a motion to approve minutes. All in favor, or motion to approve minutes?
I'll motion to approve, Grimm.
Second,
Second.
Anderson?
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
And it doesn't look like we have any members of the public present, so we will skip that portion. And on to you.
Action items from last meeting. An email did go out. If anyone on the commission is interested in receiving updates from NCJC, if you didn't receive that, feel free to contact myself or Sarah and we can get you signed up. You can also feel free to sign up on your own. In terms of following up from events, we have Megan Hill to offer a recap of last week's Climate Fest.
Yeah, so Climate Fest went really well, and we had our Green Iowa AmeriCorps team to help us this year, so that was really great. The Coco Roz training kicked off the Climate Fest event, and that was rescheduled from I think it was July because of a weather event. And we had 50-some people show up, which was really great. And so far, 32 of them have signed up to participate, which is really exciting. Some of the people were outside of Iowa City, so I don't know if they signed up, but they could have. But our trainer was very excited to see all of the people. Fair Free event on Tuesday went really well. We had several teams playing the trivia, and including some city staff members, and that celebration went great. Had a lot of fun. Then on Wednesday we had the singing event and then the film. Those two went pretty well. We had an introduction. Mandy, who's a climate ambassador, she introduced Family Folk Machine. And Family Folk Machine actually wrote a couple songs specifically for that event. They also came up to me before the event and said that they were kind of trying to figure out what to do in the next year. And because we had this concept of hope for the theme that day with the film as well, they decided that is the direction they're going with their events and their songs. So that was really great to hear. Film was great. We had somebody introduce the film and talk about self-help at the beginning. We had League of Women Voters on site as well. And the Level Up Your Climate Action Plan, we had a ton of people show up for that. Danny was one of the coaches with Sarah, along with Johnson County Clean Energy District. And we had an induction cooktop demonstration, which brought a lot of people in, and then they went to talk with the coaches. Nonprofit Nerd Out was great. Had really interesting presentations from the organizations. I'm sure Zach can speak to this as well, which again, thank you, Zach, for hosting that event. I learned a lot from each organization. It was really cool. And the EV event, again, Zach could speak to, but that went really well. We actually had an increase in people. I believe we saw 800 last year. It was over 1,600 this year that came to the EV car show. And I'm sure I missed people because I was running around, and we had a variety of vehicles this year too. Usually we have some unique ones and then some Leafs and Teslas, but we had a wide range of vehicles this year. So overall, I think it went pretty well.
Something we're very excited about with this last Climate Fest is the ripple effects. Megan mentioned that Family Folk Machine wrote some songs for this particular Climate Fest. They're going to continue to perform those songs throughout the community. So there will be a lasting impact as that message is continually spread throughout the community. Also, for the trivia that happened at Big Grove, Chris has mentioned that he's going to incorporate some of the questions involving climate in the normal trivia he does at bars all across the area. So again, another ripple effect where people will continually get that engagement that started at Climate Fest. So thank you very much. Are there any upcoming events in the community that commission members would like to make us all aware of?
This is Graham. Iowa City Schools doesn't necessarily have an event, but we do have our annual greenhouse gas emissions update, and that's tomorrow night at the operations meeting. The audio is recorded, so you can listen to that on YouTube sometime next week. There's not a lot of change. There's steady progress, but with the district, we're still struggling with Lane County REC, not having clean energy, as well as trying to convert our buses over to electric. So those are the big hurdles that we're still facing between now and 2050. So.
This is Einan Lynch. There's another Repair Cafe event happening in 2 weeks on the 19th out at the Eastside Recycling Center. So this is an event focused on building a culture of repair instead of throwing things away. And there will be repair experts there. You can bring your broken things and learn how to repair them. Things from furniture to small electronics to mending clothing, etc.
Great, thank you both. There's a note in here about the strategic plan progress report that was included in your packet, but there's also the website where you can read that as well. And if there's no questions about those items, we can go on to new business. We have Kent Ralston from the MPO with us to talk about the Crandec Bus Rapid Transit Study. Take it away, Kent.
Yeah, thank you, Danny. As Danny mentioned, my name is Kent Ralston. I am the director of the local metropolitan planning organization of Johnson County. I'm also the city's transportation planner. I thought before we jumped into the bus rapid transit conversation, it might be useful if I just give you a little bit of background about our MPO and sort of who we are and how we got to this point. Our MPO is one of 9 in the state. We've been around since 1980. MPOs are appointed by the governor of the state once your urbanized area reaches a population of 50,000. So that happened in Iowa City about 1980, 1981. We are led by a policy board, not unlike this one. We have 15 members, all elected officials except for one. So we have elected officials from Johnson County, Iowa City, Coralville, North Liberty, Tiffin, and University Heights. We also have a representative from the Iowa City Community School District, and we have a member from the University of Iowa. All elected officials, like I mentioned, except for the University of Iowa representative, which is appointed by the president of the university. And also the Iowa City Community School District member is non-voting. They're an ex officio member. So, excuse me. In about 2018, that same board, our policy board, gave the MPO staff direction to produce a passenger rail study on the Crandec line. So we're talking about the Crandec Railroad, runs roughly from Burlington Street, our portion of it that we're talking about, runs roughly from Burlington Street in Iowa City up to Penn Street, North Liberty, sort of follows the Iowa River until it gets to about Coralville, if you're familiar, and then it runs sort of straight north-south through the remainder of Coralville up through North Liberty to Penn Street. We had that study produced by HDR. Like I said, it was a 3-part study, started about 2017, 2018. And concluded back in 2020. That year, COVID hit, as you might remember, and discussions about passenger rail sort of screeched to a little bit of a halt. Partly because of COVID, but also because there's a few other things that happened. One is that the Crandec Railroad company itself decided they really didn't want to be a part of this anymore. Not that they wouldn't allow it to happen on their tracks, but they didn't really want to operate it. And the idea with the study that concluded in 2020 was they would probably be the operating partner. As you can imagine, they know how to run a rail system, we do not. Or our communities do not. So that's one thing that happened. The other was that the advent of the electric bus happened here in Iowa City. We got our first of 4 electric buses, and as you all know, it created a really big buzz. So we had sort of 2 or 3 different things happening, but the whole conversation about the Crandon rail line sort of screeched to a halt. Fast forward to last fall, 2023, our same MPO board gave us direction to hire a consultant to do a bus rapid transit study. So the whole idea behind this is we already have our rail studies, although they're just getting a little bit dated. Now we'll have a bus rapid transit study. We can compare the pros and cons of both, pick one, and move forward, essentially, is the idea behind that. I will mention that the bus rapid transit study is not done. That's why you don't have any handouts. That's why we don't have a formal presentation. We hoped it would be done about a month or so ago. The consultant's a little bit behind, and we're hoping to have the final done in about a month or so. So when you compare the two, the rail study, opening day was estimated to have about 5,300 riders. So this is the rail study. To put that in context, Iowa City Transit has about, in that ballpark, that many rides per day. And this would have about the same amount of rides per day. So basically doubling the transit ridership in our community. The rail study was projected to be about $49 million to get it up and running. And then if you project that out to 2024 dollars, it's about $60 million today with an operating cost of about $4.8 million. So again, if you extrapolate that into 2024 dollars, it's about $6 million. So roughly $50 million to get off the ground, about $6 million a year to operate. Again, these are draft numbers and subject to change, but the bus rapid transit study rather, opening day, the projection is about 3,600 riders. So lower than the 5,300 rides for passenger rail, but we have to remember that's post-pandemic and all of the transit systems across the country are still struggling to get their ridership back. So I would say comparable numbers. So about 3,600 rides per day. They're projecting about a $92 million start. So it's about $92 million to get it off the ground and running with about a $2.4 million operating budget. So again, comparing to the rail, about $60 million for rail, about $90 million for bus rapid transit, about $6 million for rail to operate it every year, about $2.4 million to operate bus rapid transit. So both, I think, could be successful. I think the density's there for it to be successful. The ridership's clearly there. At some point, we'll just have to get into the discussion with our elected officials about whether or not the subsidy is necessary to actually, or a good idea to actually produce one of these two systems. I will mention also that the bus rapid transit study included a 10-foot wide multi-use trail adjacent to it. So we had the same thing done for the rail study, but it was done separately. So for the bus rapid transit study, that would include a 10-foot wide multi-use trail that would basically parallel the Crandon corridor in the places that don't already have a trail. So again, if you're familiar with North Liberty, there's a trail that runs exactly parallel to the tracks, and it kind of trails off into Coralville, and then about the south half of Coralville and Iowa City doesn't have an adjacent trail. So that would include that as well. The other thing I wanted to mention that you may have seen in the media is a concept or a company called Pop-Up Metro. This has been in the paper a few different times. This is not something that the MPO is leading, so I may speak out of turn, but I'll try and give you the gist of what the Pop-Up Metro is. It's actually being led by Greater Iowa City Incorporated and the Better Together 2030 initiative. So they would be a better source of information, but my understanding is of it, and I've sat through a few presentations. Pop-Up Metro is a private firm. It's the Rail Development Corporation, it's called. They actually have a set of electric rail cars that they want to bring here and basically test. So their idea is instead of doing these long, expensive studies that we've been doing, their whole concept is we'll just bring a train to your community, set it up, the platforms, the maintenance facility, everything, and get it up and running. So what they would like to do is basically lease our community or the larger community their rail cars for 3 years. And again, it basically includes everything but the actual folks that would be operating the train itself, which we would hire locally, and they would help us train. I think part of the reason they're interested in our community is, one, because we've been doing these rail studies and bus rapid transit studies for years now, but also because the Rail Development Corporation owns Iowa Interstate Railroad. So they're pretty familiar with our area Iowa Interstate Railroad is another local freight line that runs through Iowa City. About 2 or so months ago, there was a group of elected officials and stakeholders that actually went to Pennsylvania to actually ride the pop-up metro train. My understanding is they really don't have this up and running in completion in any community yet. We would be the first one. So the elected officials and stakeholders went out to Pennsylvania, rural Pennsylvania, to actually ride the electric train, which they did. There is a budget for the pop-up metro floating around. I'm not going to represent that today, just because, again, that's not coming from our office, and I don't know how far along they are with that. But needless to say, it's millions of dollars a year, again, for a 3-year lease period, which is what the pop-up metro would like to offer our community. So I was hoping to have the bus rapid transit study completed, of course, for you all today. It's not here, of course. But that said, I'm hoping to have it done in about the next month. And then with that, the consultants, along with myself, will give a presentation to the community, probably either at, well, it will be one of the two, either at our next MPO board meeting, which is in November, or maybe at the next joint entities meeting. I'm not familiar with the date of the next meeting, but it'll probably be at one of those two groups, just because they include all the stakeholders from the different communities, and it's just an easy way to get the message out, so. With that, happy to answer any questions. I blew through that quick, but happy to answer any questions about the passenger rail, the bus rapid transit, or pop-up metro, if I can. Yes, sir.
Yeah, John Fraser. I, early on, when I first was a member of this commission, before we were a commission, felt strongly about Iowa City excelling in a climate action plan because of the local benefits, obviously, but more thinking about how we'd be a role model for other cities and other states. And my question is there anything train-wise that would allow us some synergies that might connect with other cities who are also interested in rail? Because one of my interests, and it's kind of selfish, is to get everything off the road. Buses, cars. I'm still so jealous of people that have train service to Chicago, so you can take your kids to the Chicago Museum on the weekend and not drive defensively for 5 hours round trip, and work on your computer and expose your kids to all that stuff. And so I love the idea of developing more rail, but not just locally, throughout the state. So would it be any benefit for us to do this, driving the train business throughout the state of Iowa?
Yeah, so in terms of synergies, I think there are some. I didn't mention that with both of these groups, there's been a stakeholder committee, right? So it's not just myself that's reviewing the materials and giving feedback. We actually have a stakeholder committee. So the stakeholder committee represents all of our local communities, the MPO community. So again, Iowa City, North Liberty, Coralville, University Heights, Tiffin, and Johnson County. That stakeholder committee also has 2 representatives from the Department of Transportation, the Iowa Department of Transportation. So we've got one from the rail side and then one from the bus side, essentially, the transit side. So in terms of synergies, I think the DOT is clearly interested in what we're doing here, and they really want to see it happen. I think they're more interested in the rail than they are the transit, and I don't know, that's just my perception. I'm not sure if that's just because of the personnel they have working with us or if there's something more to it. I think that it may be because of the Amtrak service that's been discussed to come from Chicago onto Des Moines and Des Moines onto Omaha. So I think there are some synergies, and I think there's some real excitement about getting passenger rail in the state of Iowa. I mean, we would essentially be the first, minus what Amtrak's already made available. So I think there is some real excitement, and I think the DOT probably wouldn't be as excited and spend as much time with us as they are. But I think they really want to get this off the ground in hopes that it sort of spurs some of that excitement that you're talking about.
It's probably no interest to anyone, but I'm old enough to remember my first Hawkeye football game when my grandfather, who lived in Cedar Rapids, put me on the Krandic. And we rode this one-car train from, Cedar Rapids to Iowa City and went to the Hawkeye game, and then, went back to Cedar Rapids, all on the train.
Yep.
And that was, I hate to tell you, that was 1949.
Yeah,
So-
well, and you may remember this, it was referred to as the Vomit Comet, apparently, in local terms. I guess it rocked quite a bit, and it actually was very fast. So This thing ran, I think, until like I'm gonna say about 1960 as a passenger rail, so it really wasn't all that long ago that it was operating as passenger rail, of course, from Cedar Rapids to Iowa City. It was fast and quick and efficient, and it had a huge ridership right up until the time when basically diesel engines took over and diesel buses took over the industry.
This is Einan Lynch. Ken, I was wondering, like, for your purposes today, are you here as like a FYI for us, or are you looking for a particular type of feedback or a type of question?
So that's a good question. I mean, I think officially I'm here as an FYI. I know this is what you're all interested in, obviously one piece of what you're interested in to assist with climate action efforts. I have had a few questions. Angie Smith actually reached out because she couldn't be here tonight and asked me sort of a similar question. And she said, who should we be championing this with, these concepts? And first of all, I think we've got to wait for the bus rapid transit study to be done. But once it is, I mean, you all have a certain voice and a certain goal in mind, right? And you share that with Iowa City Council. That's part of what your task is. So I think for tonight's purposes, it's mostly FYI, but when this is done in another month or so, I mean, my personal opinion is that either of these are fine, right? I'm a transportation planner. If either one of these takes place in my career and we get it up and running, then to me that is a huge win. So I think once these are done, if you all find it to be useful for your purposes, to reduce emissions and your climate action efforts, then I would say clearly you've got a pathway to the Iowa City Council and other city councils for that matter, and you can start voicing your opinion on whether or not you think these are a good idea and whether we should move forward. I'll warn you, I mean, like any transportation, these have huge subsidies that we'll have to provide, right? But we're talking 100 million, 50 to 100 million, we'll say, somewhere in that ballpark. What I like to tell folks is that the 8380 interchange that was just completed a few years ago, that was somewhere in the ballpark of $400 to $500 million, depending on how you want to look at it. So, we're talking about 50 to 100 million. That was
$500 million.
400, yeah, approaching $500 million. So, in terms of transportation, I've said, and I've been quoted in the paper a few times as saying, this is relatively inexpensive and relatively cheap. If it works the way that the consultants think it work, if we get the ridership we think it'll get, it could be hugely beneficial and really successful. The other question I'll get then once I say that is, well, what ridership is successful? And my answer is always, I don't know. Because, it's the same as Iowa City Transit. How many riders do we have to have on our buses to say that it's a success? I don't know that anybody really knows that number, but the more people we get out of their private cars, the fewer emissions we have, then of course that's a success, and we can measure those things. So that's my long-winded answer.
Just a quickie, you said either one's fine. Long-term, is this an either-or can it be a both and?
I think it's a either-or, and the reason I say that is we've asked the question, can we preserve the tracks? And if we decide to go with the bus rapid transit, can we preserve the tracks so that we can sort of switch easily in the future? And I think the answer is not easily. I've also asked the question, can we preserve one set of tracks? It used to be double tracked all the way through. Can we have space for one set of tracks, but then run the bus adjacent to it? So again, we're thereby sort of preserving our options. I think the answer is no, that we can't really do that. We sort of have to, I think, decide which direction we're going to go. But I will also say that several of the Johnson County supervisors, which I agree with, have said, as long as we're preserving the corridor, we always have the ability then to switch, right, in the future. I mean, there's going to be a cost to it. If we go bus rapid transit now and decide it should have been rail or vice versa, at least the corridor is preserved. We haven't built over it. We might even be building up around it, which will help support it in the future. So I think now it's sort of either or, but again, we're preserving it one way or another. And we've even written some letters to Crandic stating the same thing, that, hey, we're working on this as a community. It may be 10, 20 more years before we actually get this off the ground. I hope it's not, but it might be. But we really have an interest in preserving the corridor. And if Crandic wanted to unload their property, their tracks, whatever, I think the community has basically said, don't do that, come talk to us first before you'd be interested in selling that to another rail line, for instance. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. One way or another, we should just make sure we're preserving the corridor. Because as you all know, once we sell a part of that, it's likely gone forever,
Yeah.
or once Crandix sells part of that.
This is
Good
Sturtevant.
questions.
This is Sturtevant. What is involved in those numbers? Is it like all new rail cars? Is it all new, like what's the meat of these?
So the actual estimate to get it up and running, everything. So it would include for rail, for instance, upgrading the tracks, all the safety improvements that would be necessary, any upgrades to the actual track itself that's not in superior condition, bridges, culverts, all those sort of things. 2 sets of train cars. You got actually 3 sets. You got to have 2 sets running and a spare set in case there's mechanical issues or whatever. They need to clean, that sort of thing. Then there's the operations, which includes everything from the cleaning to the maintenance, to the folks that actually run the train, and it would be the same for the bus. For the bus, it's 7 buses, 5 that would run, 1 spare, and then 1, I think, in case one just completely, we have to take one completely out of service. But the same thing then, that takes, that would actually pull the tracks out, pave the new way in the actual trail in that case as well, and improvements to all the crossings, the culverts, that sort of thing. And a big part of that's the crossings, and that's whether it's the rail or the bus, is the actual intersection crossings because of the safety equipment you have to have. So a large part of that cost is the actual just hard infrastructure itself. It's a good question, but it should include everything. I mean, there shouldn't be anything else that's, oh, we forgot this or that wasn't included. It's from start to finish, should be in those numbers. It's a good question.
This is Harrelson. I don't know if the study's complete enough yet, but do you have any idea if there'd be a huge difference between like service times, or I don't know what the right terminology is?
Yeah, no, the headways would be the terminology. No, the rail was a 30-minute headway, and the bus is a 15-minute headway on peak times and a 20 or 25-minute, I think, off-peak. So they're comparable. And the start and finish is about the same. It's something like 6 in the morning till 11 at night, pretty much for both. Saturday service included. Some Sunday service was included in the rail study, but not, or excuse me, the bus study, but not the rail study, only because we would need it for going after some big grants. So there's a few huge grants out there that we would want to go after, and you have to provide a portion of service on Sundays. So it's sort of like if you want the, $30 to $40 million grant, whatever it might be, you're going to have to provide some service on Sunday, which is a good idea anyway if we can do it. So so that is one change there. Yeah, good question.
This is Gade, and I don't know if it's really a question, but I've definitely noticed more congested roadways, especially when school is in session. And I'm kind of curious what once you get the final result back of, what that might look like on those congested roads, and, would more people be stalling and waiting behind the bus for it to load? Would we have some unintended consequences and getting it more congested actually? And
Yeah, I mean, I think most of the crossings aren't at grade. So most of the crossings would be either over or under. There are some at-grade crossings, and I think there would be some consequence to it, but the idea, I think, is that we can make it work without adding a ton of congestion, a ton of extra emissions, because otherwise we just can't, it won't hold up. So it's a really good question. I think primarily there's only a few crossings we have to worry about, but those crossings we have some experience with today, because even though the freight line doesn't run very often, it does run occasionally, so we sort of know how to react to that. So there will be some additional congestion. I think it's impossible to say there won't be, but I think the idea is that we'll be able to minimize that.
And maybe with more people riding, you would have less
Right.
congested. So
Right.
yeah,
Right.
could be good too.
Yep. And part of what we can do too is, we actually do it now, but we try to sync the signals as well as we can. So for instance, if you're on Burlington Street if you're on Burlington here at 5 o'clock, none of the signals are going to be very well synced together because they're thrown out by when somebody uses a pedestrian push button. But if you drive the same corridor at midnight, you can pretty much go from east to west, west to east, all on greens on Burlington Street. And we can use that same sort of system to try and integrate the rail crossings. So hopefully, if we can do a good enough job, there shouldn't be a ton of added congestion.
This is Sturman. Is part of these like hubs, parking lots, places that people can access this easily, or is it going to be kind of make your way there?
A little of both. There's a lot of connectivity that already exists today, basically to the tracks, whether it's through neighborhoods and that sort of thing, that there's no place to go today, but there's already a lot of that in place. But especially the bus rapid transit study actually includes like a hub on the north end. So roughly north of Penn Street, adjacent to the tracks, there's actually a lot of open land right now. And the idea is that they would actually construct like a park and ride facility. So people coming from Cedar Rapids could park, get on the bus, and then come into town rather than have to come into town and find their way, however their last mile travel is, so to speak, whether it's bike or walk. Yep.
This is Anderson. I think I can anticipate your answer, but the scope of the rail study, does it include like a hypothetical situation, kind of akin to what Frank was saying about, like if we were to link up with a larger rail system at some point, or would that be like outside the scope of this study?
It's outside the scope. It's outside the scope, but I think I'm trying to think. For the bus rapid transit, it's easier, right? Because the buses can come and go off the corridor, right? They're not actually fixed in like a train would be. So I think that's part of the allure of a bus rapid transit study, and it's easier, I think, for most people to wrap their heads around, because at the end of the day, the bus can jump off that guideway, so to speak, and go anywhere it wants, right? So it can jump off that, link up with Amtrak in the future, a stop, whatever it is. The rail's a little tougher, right? Because you can't just take the rail's the rail, you're there. So that it gets a little harder to link things up. But the idea, and it's not included in the study to be clear, but I think the idea is that if that happens in the future, it's pretty easy for us to make those connections, especially if it's the bus rapid transit route. So, yep. And part of the bus rapid transit study actually looked at what other transit routes would be affected. So part of a bus rapid transit study, right, we're going to cannibalize some of the other routes anyway, right? So there's a certain number of CAM bus routes and Coralville routes that may no longer even be necessary because of the bus rapid transit. And then there's some other routes we're going to cannibalize some of that ridership and pull them onto the bus rapid transit. So that's all included in the studies. There are projections on which routes actually will reduce. We're going to reduce ridership on some of those likely. Some may not be necessary at all. Yep.
Thanks. Although on the rail side, does the Krandick line still exist all the way up to Cedar Rapids?
It still exists to Cedar Rapids. Our studies basically stopped at North Liberty.
Right, but in terms of then in the future linking to that,
Right.
that still exists. They are still connected
Yes, they are.
physically.
Yep.
So that could be a stepping stone hypothetically.
Yeah, no, and that's the question we most often get is, well, why doesn't this study go to Cedar Rapids? And one of the first studies we had done years ago showed that the ridership just isn't there. Part of it is we're just close enough, I guess, if you want to say that, to Cedar Rapids, that if you live in Cedar Rapids and you're working in Iowa City, you've got to somehow find your way to get on a train. Then you've got to ride the train, to Iowa City. Then you've still got that last mile where you've got to figure out how to get off the train and get to your job. So, and I think we're close enough together that to make basically 3 linked trips, it's easier for people just to say, I'm either gonna, do something different, take the I-380 Express or whatever's there, or drive your personal vehicle. I feel like if we were another 10, 20 miles further, it might make more sense, but I think we're almost just too close to do that.
Or we get another few clicks more congested.
I was going to
That's
say.
probably the more likely thing, is that we'll get a little bit more congested. At the same time, the Iowa DOT is currently 6-laning 380 basically all the way to Cedar Rapids. I mean, they have plans to do that. So, but, whether it's 6 lanes now, they may not be able to go to 8, and then 20, 30 years from now, there may be the congestion that we actually need to make that happen.
Well, and I do make that commute every day. I
Right.
can tell you it's not fun.
Right.
And even adding another lane, then you just have induced demand, and there's going to be more, and then, I totally agree with John that long-term, I think rail from here to there in terms of like climate impact, I think that is a huge, huge thing. For me, that's a big priority, I think. So as far as championing these ideas, I agree. I think that's a huge thing that this commission could do. So if we can like, yeah, get the first baby step towards that, and if this pop-up metro could be like a quick, I don't know, first, you know, just a few years, and maybe it's less expensive than the $50 million setup fees and
Right.
all of that. So I guess, sorry, now I'm kind of rambling, but, so you said the pop-up metro is not by the MPO. Do you know what would be the best way then for us to champion that? Or like,
Yeah.
how does that interplay with the bus study versus the rail study? Do we still wait for them both to be done and then,
Right.
I don't know.
So jumping back to just getting to Cedar Rapids on the
Sorry,
rail.
yeah.
No, that's fine. So it used to do it, right? It used to do it in the 50s, and it was wildly successful right up until buses sort of took over with the advent of the diesel engine. So I think it can be done, and I'll say whatever we do here, whether it's rail or bus, none of that will preclude us from going further north, right? So there's no like end that just is like, okay, we've goofed this up or we can't go further. So if we get to North Liberty with whatever kind of mode we choose, there's nothing that we're gonna do that'll preclude us from continuing on. So we've got that in mind. The difficulty with, once you get towards Cedar Rapids right now, Crandall will tell you, is that they use the line really heavily up there for freight. I think it's ADM and Penford and all the big companies you see along the Crandall line when you get up there. They use it really heavily, so they have told us, and granted, time changes things, but they have told us that if we were to do that, they would essentially have to establish a new rail bed somewhere to make that connection up into Cedar Rapids, which can happen. Little more difficult, but can happen. But it's also entirely possible that those companies won't need what they need today in 10 or 20 years, so hard to say. For the second question, for the pop-up metro, the timing has been a little wonky, and I've been a little bit frustrated with it, I'll be honest with you. I was pretty worried when pop-up metros sort of came around and getting them involved that it was gonna just confuse everyone. I think I'm wrong. I think everybody's been able to pretty much keep them separate. But that was one of my concerns, is that, you know, our group has been told, we're done, you know, we don't wanna do any more studies, right? We don't wanna do any more studies, we wanna see something done. The studies are expensive, they take a long time, but they're necessary in my mind. So pop-up metro comes and said, we can just do it right now, right? For a certain amount of money, we can be there tomorrow. Everything sounds great. So I had some concerns with introducing that concept while we're still working on a bus rapid transit concept. And then now, so we went rail, now we're talking about bus, and now we're sort of flipped back to rail. I think my concerns were probably misguided. I don't think it's really an issue. I think what most folks that are interested in the pop-up metro will tell you is that any like forward thrust that we have, just talking about the Crandall line, whether it's bus, whether it's rail, is good. And I've since sort of come around to that, where, yeah, that's probably true. Just any kind of thrust we have moving forward to do something on those lines is probably what we would all like to see, and is good for different purposes. So I think for pop-up metro, in terms of sort of pushing that forward, I think they're still working on their budget, and they're getting sort of they're kind of finalizing what they need to do. The bus rapid transit study should be done in the next month. So we're gonna have like 3 different things to look at here within the next month or so, but that's gonna make it a lot easier, because it's just pros and cons then. It's right, this one's what this costs, here's what we get. This is what this costs, here's what we get. And I think if the community chooses a direction, that's gonna be the hardest part, I think, is just choosing a direction. But once we do that, I think your job would be the same as Iowa City Council. This is a great idea, whatever it might be, if you agree. And we really need to get this done, right? Start putting money towards it, start, making those moves. I should mention too, that these are feasibility studies, these aren't construction, right? So, and I think that's also frustrating to folks that aren't really in our industry. This is just feasibility. This is just see if it'll actually work and to see what the numbers might be. The next step, of course, is to actually produce construction drawings and then actually build the thing. So I think that timeline is just painstakingly slow for folks that aren't really in our industry, but that's just, unless it's pop-up metro, that's usually how it works, so. That answer your question?
Yes, yeah, thank you so much.
Can you clarify one part of what you just said? You said once we choose the direction, then our job would be to help advocate for it. When MPO chooses a direction?
No, I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, it's all taxpayer money. The community is gonna have to choose, right? And by community, it's sort of like anything else. I think it's, the city council starts to talk about buying a new bus, let's say, just a new bus, right? There's public comment periods, there's discussion at a council meeting. I mean, if we were to buy a new podium, right? There's discussion, there's council meetings, it's in a budget. So there'll be multiple points at which the city council will have a discussion about which direction we want to go, about budgeting, about when we're going to budget, about how we're going to budget, are we going to borrow money for it? So at all those sort of touch points, that's when I think the community at large will decide, which direction we need to go. Clearly, the city council is going to make at some point, they're going to have to say, yes, I mean, we feel the direction should be nothing, or rail, or bus. But clearly, there's going to have to be a lot of community input. And we really haven't got there yet either. Because at the feasibility level, for us, there isn't much of a point in asking the public what they think if we don't know it's feasible. It's, hey, do you want a bus rapid transit system? And they say, yeah, let's do it. We go out and find out it's impossible. It just doesn't link up. So we do this first, then we go to the public and say, hey, here's some ideas that we have. We know what they'll cost, roughly. We haven't gone to, into design and construction yet, of course, but how do you feel about this? And that's really no different than most of the things we do.
And are you anticipating that, like you said, the bus study would be done in the next month or so? Is that then we'll start, then we're going to be starting to go that direction or starting to take that input, or you're not sure what the timeline will be?
Yeah, I mean, I think the pop-up metro's just about there. The bus rapid transit should be done in about the next month. So I honestly think we'll give a presentation, like I mentioned earlier, either at the MPO board meeting or probably at the joint entities meeting, because that includes all the different jurisdictions and stakeholders. And then I think really then they've already heard about the passenger rail. They've been hearing and having discussions about pop-up metro. Then it's really, it's like anything. You got to look at the pros and cons and figure out what direction we want to head, if we're going to head a direction at all. And then start budgeting, start design, and that sort of thing. So I don't know if I have a good answer for you, but it's at some point, I mean, the community at large has to decide and tell us all what they think is best.
This is Gade, and I have a couple questions. As far as the bus rapid transit study, I'm kind of curious about what workforce looks like currently for our folks who are driving the bus right now. Like are there any shortages there? Is there anything to be, concerned about in the future if we do have this as a larger scale?
Yes, there is a shortage of drivers. Danny in his former career could help talk about this too, but we are, about a month or two ago, fully staffed with drivers, I had heard, and that's the first time in years. I mean, since basically pre-pandemic. So we are constantly at a shortage for drivers. But I would say I don't think, it may not take as many drivers, but I think it may take as many staff in general for a train. So my guess is they're about the same.
Okay.
And there's just a shortage of workers, just like any industry. So I think that will be a struggle.
Yeah. My other question is, are there any, not to be negative, but are there any unintended consequences to be aware of? So, I mean, I do live in North Liberty. It's in my backyard. What does that look like for folks as far as the rail of sound, or, is it actually great because I can just hop on the bus, or not the bus, but the train right outside my door? Or, what does that look like for community members?
Right, so we've had some of those concerns because all three of these studies, whether it was the rail, the bus rapid transit, or pop-up metro, they've all been in the paper at some point in time over the last 3 to 5 years, multiple times. So we have actually had a number, not a lot, but we've had a number of folks that have been interested and said the same thing. They said, hey, this is in my backyard. When do I get to voice my opinion? Which kind of gets back, Michael, and I think your question is, we haven't got to the public input process yet, right? Because these are just feasibility studies to see if this is even something we can offer the public. Now I think we know we can offer it to the public and we know what it's going to cost. Now we have to go out and start actually asking the public, is this something you want? And that's one of the negative consequences. I don't want it to sound, sort of like a slippery slope. But you could also say, you know, if this is in your backyard, it'll be an electric vehicle, one way or another, electric bus or electric train likely, which may be quiet, may not, but hopefully be quiet. But also you can say, okay, Crandon could start using, I don't know how likely it is, but they could start using diesel trains and run down the hills every day if they want, or 5 times a day, right? So it's sort of that's why I don't want it to sound like, oh, this is better than what's not there now, but it could be better than what could be there in the future. It's hard to say.
Something, yeah, just as you already know, those concerns, that's definitely something to be prepared for once public comment
Right.
kind of starts to go and, you know, look at all the benefits too.
Yeah, no, I anticipate a lot of that once this actually gets out into the public because, as you know, I mean, through Iowa City, not quite as much, but Coralville and North Liberty, it's primarily all residential areas that it runs through. So, yeah, I anticipate quite a bit of that.
This is Sturdivant. Is there any like federal push in one way or the other? Because I know they're talking, you know, big on rail car right now. And do you anticipate any like outside influences? And
I don't anticipate a lot of outside influence, but our hope is for outside funding sources. This likely will not happen unless we can get some large federal grants. And part of all the studies we've had done is asking what federal money can we go after, state and federal money. And there are some large grants we can go after, and the bipartisan infrastructure bill most recently set aside quite a bit of money for new programs for this very sort of thing. So not a lot of outside influence, but I think we're gonna have to clearly reach outside and see if we can gain some federal dollars.
This is Einan Lynch, but just to clarify, does the funding favor bus over train or train over bus, or is it pretty like, as long as it's rapid transit connecting communities?
They'd likely be different funding sources to begin with, so I wouldn't say one over the other, right? You're either applying for the bus funds or you're applying for the rail funds. Yep. They are very competitive, some of them, and some of them very hard to receive. And as I mentioned before, even having Sunday service in the bus rapid transit study, the consultant said, well, we can not have Sunday service because we don't have it now, as I think most everybody probably knows. So he said, we might not want to just throw that out there as a new service without asking the community. We might have a shortage of drivers, you know, a shortage of buses, whatever it might be. And they said, well, you can't go after this one really huge grant that you're likely to get unless you have Sunday service. And we said, well, okay, we almost have to leave it in then if we want a service. So it's hard to say having Sunday service is a bad thing. It's just, you know, we haven't got to the point of asking communities, do you actually want this yet? But it's in the study for that purpose. Any other questions? So I would mention, there was 3 phases of the rail study. All 3 are available on our MPO website, and it's just mpojc.org. Super easy. Go into the publications tab, and all 3 of those are there for you to see. The bus rapid transit study I mentioned should be done hopefully by November 1st, give or take. We're already a little bit late, but should be ready in the next 3 to 4 weeks. That will also be available once it's done and presented to the communities and posted on our MPO website as well. So I also anticipate it being in the paper and, you know, collecting some media interest. So it'll be out there here in the next 3 or 4 weeks. And I think that's when you'll start to hear the communities talk about, okay, we've got all these different options. Now what do we do? And I honestly don't know what we'll do first, but there'll be a lot of buzz about it, I think. And I'd be happy to come back and talk to you about the bus rapid transit study once it's done as well. Any other questions?
Well, thank you so much, Kent. That was very detailed and informative. Like he mentioned, we will, once that final report is available, put that in the first agenda packet for you all that we have it for. And then if that brings up any questions, we'd be happy to pass those along to Kent or invite him back.
Very good. Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Kent. Can we just like talk for a minute about how we might or would like to, as a group, advocate for something? One of these things, all of these things?
Sure, absolutely.
I need all the data first. I need all the studies done first until I don't know.
Yeah,
have
I think-
information.
I wonder if it might be good to also hear from Pop-Up Metro, if that's possible in the next few months.
I will look into that.
Yeah, Angie sent me also the recording of the
Yeah, I
joint.
sent
Did you
that
say?
to her.
Oh, that was good. That was good background.
Yeah, actually, Danny, I don't know if that would be possible to put in the minutes for this week. I sent that to Sarah. Gosh, it was almost a month ago now, I guess. The recording of the joint entities meeting where the MPO and Pop-Up Metro were presenting about all of this, and it kind of gives a lot of background about what the actual plans are, and there's some slide decks in there that you can like watch, and it was a really informative presentation, I thought.
All right, yeah, I will put in my notes to dig up that recording and send that to the
Yeah.
commission.
I can send it to you if you need it.
Great.
But to your point, Jamie, I'm not thinking that we would decide what we want to advocate for, but I'm just thinking ahead to like, would we then, like, once we get all the information, discuss and sort of choose a path that we'd like to advocate for and, write a memo? Do we want a subset of this group to look more closely at the studies and make a recommendation? Just thinking like what process we'd like to follow as this becomes more available.
I'm hearing there might be an interest in a working group.
Seems like.
I'll
And
make
to
a note
add
of
to
as
that,
well.
I love trains, but that's not the reason to do this. Our whole purpose is to reduce greenhouse gas effect, enhance our climate action efforts, and I don't know which one is going to lead us the best direction. I think trains are cool, but that might not be the best answer to the climate challenges we're facing. I don't know.
So procedure-wise, it would be that we're requesting that it be brought back as a future agenda item, right? After all the information is out there, that'd be probably the next natural step is agenda item with some sort of discussion, I would guess anyways.
Yeah, that would be correct, and we can do that. Like I mentioned, we'll put that final report in the packet once it's available, and we'll probably make a note, Gabe, to have that as an item for discussion once it is available.
So
Okay.
when we talked with Sarah to review the bylaws, which we'll talk about next, Sarah did mention that the work groups or subcommittees are kind of less desirable, I suppose, as far as what the city manager had said. So I'm wondering if could it even be like a special meeting that we could have to just talk about what our approach could be, and as a group, and just fully transparent and get everyone in the room, if everyone's open to that too. I don't know how long that would take or what it would look like exactly, but just throwing that out there. I don't know if that's the best way to approach that.
This is Sturdivant, so yeah, as Jamie was saying, basically, like, working groups are not normal for commissions like us. And so it's kind of trying to move away from that and having the full commission's input on things. That's kind of, I think, what city is wanting. Is that kind of correct? That's the impression that we got from
Okay.
that, so.
Thank you
That's
for letting
at
me
least
know.
what we think. We can ask Sarah, but that's kind of, I think we can call a special meeting technically of us, so I think once everything gets out, that might be the best route to go, but, it could be a couple months away too, so I don't want to like say, yeah, we're going to address it, but everything's not there. So, if that helps anybody.
Yeah, thank you for that, Gabe. I actually was not aware of the call to move away from working groups, so if a special meeting is an option, we can put that on the list.
And that's something that any commission member can call. So if somebody sees all the data and says, hey, I'd like something, absolutely feel free to speak up. And, Michael, if you want to, say, hey, I'd like to bring it up. I think that's the route, but I'd like to double check with Sarah to make sure I fully understood that that's what she was implying.
I wasn't aware there was concern about working groups either. I'm kind of giggling because I was around before we ever had working groups, and the theory was we would find 3 or 4 or 5 people that are particularly interested in a specific topic, really energized, and it wasn't their responsibility to do the end-all and present the end-all. It was to get to the point where then we could all operate together, and because of their energy and their passion to that specific topic, we'd have 3 or 4 things going simultaneously. And I'm sorry to hear that maybe we want to back away from it, because I think it's got some positives, it's got some negatives as well. But I'd hate to see it go away, frankly.
I suppose to give more context from what Sarah had said, and I feel so bad she's not here to say anything either. But in talking with the city manager, we're almost a subcommittee of the city council. So to have, it's just more of the layers that I think is more concerning. And then having a special meeting potentially involves everybody. So working groups can only be so many before we have, everybody, and it would have to be a public meeting. Then we would be able to have everybody included and be more transparent, I suppose, for what the topics are discussed. But yeah, to give more background, I know I was a little surprised, I suppose, too, but.
Is that a good segue into the bylaws discussion?
I think that's a great segue. If nobody else has any comments about the bus rapid transit or pop-up metro?
No, good topic, though. Thank you. Really appreciate that presentation. He's got passion for what he does.
Okay. So now we have a discussion of proposed updates to the bylaws. This is something that Sturt Event and Gate have been working on, so I'll hand it over to them.
I don't have everything exactly in front of me, but what we're asked to do today is address part of the, you can fill me in, but address part of the bylaws. So what we would be voting on today is a vote to change the bylaws, and there's 2 portions of that we'd like to change, and those were sent out. So we're not actually voting to change the bylaws. It's really confusing. So we're voting to change the bylaws, but we're not voting on what the change is yet. We have to vote that we want to change the bylaws. And then we can go in and address those changes in the future.
I think we are voting for the changes.
Are we voting? Well, okay. So yes, we're voting to change part of the bylaws. And then what we're changing, we can discuss what that change actually is. So what we're looking at is changing like the meeting times. So that's something that we can discuss, but we have to vote that we'd want to change the meeting times. We don't need to vote to actually change them because that's up to us. We have to vote saying that we are changing.
I have a different
Is that?
I'm so sorry. Okay.
And there is another layer on top of
Yeah.
this, because
Yeah.
this does have to go through the City Council Rules Committee and then the full City Council. So just to be clear, any change that you all decide to make to the bylaws will then go to the Rules Committee, which is 2 members of City Council. And then after that, it will then go to the full City Council.
I'm sorry.
The city council has a sub-council.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do. You got it. My understanding is that we would vote for these 2 changes, and the first change would be on membership, that we would elect a vice chair and chair in June. So this idea would be that we would allow new members to have more of a feel of the commission before voting directly the next day or the next meeting that they first attend. So they would have more time and potentially even put their name in the hat for those positions if they feel passionate about that. And then the other change would be that instead of 3 consecutive unexplained absences, it would be 3 consecutive absences without prior notification. So that would be of recommendation to city council to discharge a member from the commission. So without prior notification of what we had talked about was that if it was a kind of no call, no show up until even, during the meeting, even if you had texted, or messaged during the meeting, hey, I'm so sorry I'm not able to, come today because of this, then that's okay. It's more of just not showing up at all, no notification, and kind of allowing more room for folks who are passionate and are able to attend meetings to do so, and have more involved members in that case. But I believe we would need to vote on those two today, and then and we can additionally discuss in the next meeting or continue to think about times that would work for you and your schedule, so that we can discuss that in the next meeting. But we don't have to vote on meeting times. Is that correct? Is that right?
Yeah, so you're not voting on actually what time to change the meeting to. You're voting on, we are going to change the meeting time, potentially. So you're not voting on what time, you're voting that we will change it. So it's kind of, it took us a little bit to kind of understand it, but that's
The way it's written,
what
it's up to us to choose what time and the location of meeting. So we don't have to ask city.
yeah, we don't need
council
to
for it.
vote or ask for approval on that.
I see.
Yeah,
We're still
it's-
sending this to the council for approval that we're going to do that, but
We're not
Yeah, it's up to
picking what
us.
time.
I
Yeah.
got it.
So is it a movement to just adopt these changes, or do we have to do them individually?
It's,
It's probably either or.
you're voting to say yes or no, I'd like these changes made. But
To
you're,
send this memorandum to the
and
council.
yeah, we're voting to, yes, send this to city council, and then at a future point, we can determine the time, but the absences is kind of, there's not really anything to determine on that.
And these are not three different requests. This is one memo,
Right.
one request with three components.
Correct,
Okay.
yeah, you're voting one vote for the two things we would like to potentially change.
Zion Lynch, can I ask, can I just back up a second to the bylaws review? I know I've looked at the bylaws recently, but I wasn't looking at them in the mindset of I'm thinking about what should be different. And so now I'm like, oh, I should look at the whole bylaws to think about this in context. So I guess I'm curious, were there other parts of the bylaws that stood out to you or that you guys were considering as you look to see what need to be changed? I mean, these are, relatively minor things, so.
Yes, I think we did have a good discussion about other potential changes. We did talk about compensation too. I know that's been a topic brought up in other commissions, and even, in my work too, it's been brought up. And so that was an area we felt we didn't have enough information on yet. But, potentially what could it look like if we had somebody who was involved in a work product that wanted to present with the team at a conference, and what would that look like if conference fees were paid for then, or if the chair was able to attend a conference with staff. So we did talk about a couple of those things, but we felt maybe some more talk could be had around those topics, or more thought from staff on that. I think overall, the reason why this was a review is because of the strategic plan of where it's at right now, and hopefully making changes so that it's a little bit more equitable, especially with the time change and the location, not location change, I'll say time change, just to see if we could get more folks who we don't typically see because of the time we meet. But yeah, were there any other topics that way?
I think it was mainly just language, in wording, but it was more, it sounds okay now, so let's not because kind of we have to vote on making all these changes, and then, so we figured that Sarah mentioned these two being the most because it's been 5 years since these bylaws were done, and so it's kind of more just reapproaching and looking at it, but looking over it, it didn't seem like anything, and any other changes really wouldn't make a change. So there wasn't a need to change that because it wouldn't do anything.
So would would it be like we motion to accept this memo? And then if there's further discussion that people want to have for individual items, they could be like, no, and then we could break it out like that, or, yeah.
Do you know, is that, because the way it was explained to me is we're voting on both these, and then we discuss just the time at a later date, because we don't need to get city approval for that.
Yeah, my understanding is that the memo is a package deal, but I think now would be the time for any discussion about any changes to that memo that the commission feels.
And we
would like
don't
to
have to
address.
vote on it today either. If you want to, take time to think about it, we absolutely don't have to vote today too, so.
Do we have a copy of the language, the final copy of the language in the memo? That could be the motion? I mean, the motion is to approve this memo, and I can't remember now, are there 2 components or 3 components to the memo?
Two components mostly.
yeah.
Those two changes. And then additional consideration for the meeting dates and time.
I would love, I'm just like, if we could wait another meeting and send the current bylaws just for like a glance over. It's so hard for me to to approve this like out of context of looking at the whole thing. Do you know what I mean? Even though I know these are like minor changes, I don't have any, I'm not like, no, I feel basically fine with these, but it's just like, if we're doing a review, I would like to look at them with that in my mind, you know what I mean?
I will say a larger review may involve the city attorney, and these small changes did not have to involve the city attorney. So I think that's also why smaller changes were made now. I do feel like there is, I won't say that, but we'll say, yeah, if there is a major overwrite of certain bylaws, it would be a more time-intensive process, but.
How do we know what that red line is that you do or do not involve the city attorney?
That's like a Sarah. We'd pretty much have to, because like a couple of things we did mention, and Sarah did say, like, this might involve the city attorney just because of how it's worded, and the changes that would need to be made would change the wording enough that we'd have to have city attorney approval and then city council. That's the way it was explained to us, so.
I'm just gonna say, I think these changes that are presented are the ones for sure we don't need help, and anything beyond that, we would definitely probably need to talk to our attorney's office.
So this isn't our last chance. These are a couple minor things. Is there any reason we couldn't vote on them today, knowing that we can look into the future about changing bylaws? Is one of these permission to change the bylaws? Is that part of the memo? In general?
I think.
It's changing,
Well, I looked at that, but I
It's changing these.
it's changing those 2 specific items in the bylaws.
okay.
So it's not an overall change, it's just these 2 are the ones that we don't need approval for. It's ones we can do in-house that we wouldn't have to wait on. But again, we don't have to do anything right now.
Well, we have
It's
to
just,
do
it's
it,
just,
we have
it's
to
just.
do it
mo-
sometime.
Yes, we would like to do it sometime, and the sooner we get like the time change, then it can, so since that it
So
does have to go
what's going to
through a
change
few-
between now and the time that we're more ready to approve this memo? I'm ready to approve it right now, but I don't know about anybody else. I mean, if we wait, what are we gaining?
I suppose if we vote to accept now with the thought that we want to review later, I guess my concern would be bringing it back to the council again would maybe bring up some red flags, I suppose, or maybe it would maybe be good to only ask once potentially.
For everything.
Yeah, and put everything in there. But I don't know, that's just more of my experience.
I do have one question, I guess, on substance of the changes too. Is the intent that if someone is elected in June, well, let me back up. My term started in January and ends in December. Is that the case for all of the positions? Okay, so if someone is elected in June and their term ends in December, are they then not eligible to be elected in that June?
That was one thing we had talked with about, and we weren't 100% sure on how that would, if that changes when people serve. This is just about voting for chair, vice chair. That.
Right, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
So I understand.
Yeah.
It's encouraging someone in their first year to potentially try to go for chair or vice chair in their first year in that June. But in their third year, then they're now ineligible because their term would end in December.
So I
Is that
actually
true?
came in as a midterm and then got reelected.
Okay.
So that happened to me, and I couldn't tell you the length of time.
Well,
I came in-
onto the commission or
Came in-
as a
yes,
chair.
I came in and finished out a term, I think, because I didn't spend a full 3 years, and then I got reelected.
Uh-huh.
And I couldn't tell you exactly how that panned out, but I'm pretty sure I was one of them.
Okay, but I mean, as a chair, right? If my 3-year term on the commission, and at 2.5 years I want to be the vice chair or whatever,
Oh, I see what you're saying.
then you could, and then that term would just end in December, and then we'd pick a
If-
new one in January.
Well, if you get reelected, like
Yeah,
you can
if you
apply
come back
again.
to the
Yeah,
to
I
the
think that it
commission again.
depends.
Okay.
And
Okay.
then-
I'm just sorry. I'm just trying to.
That does
That
seem
was-
interesting
Yeah.
to me, if the idea is to help newer people raise their hand, but then in their third year or their later years where they're maybe more knowledgeable, like more qualified for the role, then it would be harder for them to do it then. This is kind of like,
Yeah.
right, that's.
Yeah, and I'm not saying. I'm just kind of asking the question, I guess.
Yeah.
That was one question we had too, is if you vote in June and you end in December, what happens in that gap?
I wish Sarah was here. But I believe it would be then, a vacancy if you wanted to discontinue the term. And then I believe because it's a vacancy, the vice chair would step into the chair role. And then either we do another election for vice chair or we just go without vice chair for those 6 months. I believe that is what Sarah said.
Does voting for chair and vice chair have to go through, like that's just on us, correct? We don't have to send that, so if come December, there's no vice chair?
Right.
Okay. Do you guys want to vote on this today? Like, I know Michael's, I don't know whether it's worth putting a motion forward or if you guys are going to say, wait, and.
I think, and I'm just going to jump in and say this earlier, John, I think I called you Frank I'm a little jet lagged still, so sorry. I misspoke. But to rephrase your question earlier, just now you asked like if we would gain something by waiting. Like I guess another way of putting it is like, are we going to lose something if we like wait another meeting? Like because personally, like, it's if we need a little extra time for individual people to review it, that's fine with me. Unless there's like some thing where it's like, well, no, there's this thing buried in here that if we don't vote on it now, then we're screwing
It's
ourselves.
really just getting it to city council.
Right,
Is like, however long it takes for us to vote on this, there's those steps and going through the 2 other people and then getting the city, so there's more steps after it.
Sure.
It's just delaying those steps. That's,
Okay.
I think that's the only negative
Okay.
in this.
Yeah, I know it's tied to the strategic plan, but I don't know exactly what other commissions' timelines look like either for reviewing their bylaws. So if we have, that wasn't super clear. So if it was delayed, that's fine.
Well, somebody had asked if there's value in waiting to review all the bylaws and add the other changes to these, and I'm still unclear whether that was a good thing to do or a bad thing to do.
I mean, if we want, we could, like, I feel like procedurally, there needs to be a motion to either vote on it now or a motion to table it till next time, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So, I mean, if we want, I'll just make a motion to table it until next time, and then we vote on that motion, right?
Yes.
Okay. Do we want to do that? And then, go from there, or,
I would second that motion. Einen Lynch.
okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Ayes have
I'm
it.
gonna say nay. I'm sorry. But that's okay.
Sarah, you failed.
After looking at their very simple bylaws, but yeah, that's okay.
I thought you were saying you, never mind, okay. Daniel, can we have a follow-up to send the bylaws out again?
Yes, we will send the entire bylaws to the commission for review.
Thank you.
All right, on to the recap. The next meeting will be Tuesday, November 5th at 3:30 PM in this same room. Actionable items for the commission will be to think about a day and time for not this coming meeting, but the next November. Apparently, there are some conflicts with November 2025. So think about a date and time for that meeting, and there might be some discussion on that. Staff will send the bylaws to the commission, and when the final report of the bus rapid transit study becomes available, we will include that in the packet. We will also send out a video of the joint meeting with a presentation on the pop-up metro. I think that's it. Am I forgetting anything?
I do have one question. As part of what we're supposed to do between now and the next meeting, I think about when we want to have meetings in the future. I guess I'm a little blank about why we're changing. And if we're going to change, is the question, John, what's best for you? And I say, well, I like Thursdays at 4 o'clock, and you like Fridays at 8 o'clock in the morning. I mean, are we just trying to find some consensus for the best time for all of us? Is that the goal?
The goal is to consider equity and when some folks to try to get some more diversity on the commission, to get some more people to step up who might not be available at this time in the afternoon on a weekday. I think, do Sturtevant or Gade have anything to add on that?
Yeah, we're wanting to change the times because it might mean more people could potentially attend these meetings. So you could have more public involvement. You could have people that have to work till 5 and have no way of getting here. So it's kind of thinking forward because, again, it has been 5 years. So thinking the next 5 years, what's going to change and what kind of future do we envision for the commission kind of beyond yourselves? So you can, think of what time works for you, but think of kind of going
But
forward.
that's
what
very
works too.
helpful, and I hadn't even considered that. So we might consider evening meetings, or we might consider a weekend meeting, or whatever.
Right,
In
and
order
that's-
to enhance the audience
Correct.
participation.
And we can vote on that time within ourselves. We don't have to send that to city council to get approved on what time or anything like that. So
Well,
what
that makes
works
sense
for
then.
you
I was just,
can,
I'm
yeah.
kind of confused
Yeah,
why
it
Mondays
is.
didn't work, and it's
Right.
not Mondays, it's the time of day for the equity issue. Okay, that's
You
very.
guys talk about, do we have any data on times when more people are available, or like, I don't even know how we're gonna proceed with figuring that out, but.
I think it was more of just an availability thing is we have to vote to change.
No,
We have to,
That makes sense to me.
Yeah, it's-
I've already
y-
anticipated,
yeah.
like, because I'm going to be starting a new job, and I don't know how flexible they're going to be with, coming here at 3:30. That makes sense to me. Like,
Right.
5 p.m. But I mean, whatever the discussion is at that time, makes
yeah,
total sense.
And we had brought up like childcare and bus routes and, what happens in winter when it takes you an extra half hour to get places. So there's a lot to think about, but that's kind of a new vision going forward, I think.
And just to be clear, other boards and commissions are all over the map in terms of time of day, days of the week. So there's really no one standard. And again, that can be set by this group. And other boards and commissions are all over the map.
With that being said, I'm curious if you've noticed commissions who meet later have more public participation versus commissions who meet earlier. Is there any way to track public participants?
That is a good question. I don't know, but I can try to find out.
Okay, thank you.
More data.
Yeah.
Danny, I think one last action was to see if the pop-up metro people might want to come talk in the next couple of months,
Yes, thank you for that.
which I think it was Greater Iowa City and Better 2030. I don't know which is the actual organization person. But
Greater Iowa City and Better, what's the second word?
Better 2030.
Better
Better
together.
together, 2030.
Better Together 2030.
Thank you.
I think Katie Gerlach would be the main person to talk to.
Okay. All right.
Motion to adjourn.
Second, Grimm.
All in favor?
I-
Do we have a first?
Yeah, I think we need
I can be a first.
Yeah, sorry. Yes, first motion to adjourn.
Second, Grimm.
I'll be the first. Gade will, okay.
Thank you.